Well, this now brings us to Chapter 11, where we're going to study observational studies as well as experiments and how to design them. So an observational study is just that. Essentially, we are going to observe what is going on in the world around us, but we're not making any attempt to alter or change anything to see what the results are. That would be an experiment. So an observational study is essentially us observing what's going on in the world around us. We have an example of an observational study where researchers compared GPAs of students who studied music to students who did not study music at the local high school. So they're comparing the GPAs of musically inclined and non-musically inclined students. The results were that the average of music students' GPAs was 0.68 points above the average of non-music students. So the question is, does that mean that if you study music, your GPA will be higher? Absolutely not. So an observational study cannot give us a cause and effect relationship. It might be that that is true, that if a student studies music, that we can conclude that their GPA will in fact be higher. Because it's not an experiment, we cannot say for sure that one variable changed or caused the other. Quite often there's a lurking variable. For instance, musicians maybe have more supportive parents, and therefore they make them study their music, and they also make them study, other subjects. Maybe people who are smarter play an instrument, and therefore that cause and effect relationship might be in reverse. So we don't really know that until we actually do an experiment. There are two types of observational studies. There's retrospective and prospective. So retrospective essentially means we're taking data that's already been gathered, or we're taking information that we already have that has occurred in the past, and then we're looking at the relationship between two variables. That would be retrospective. Most commonly with retrospective studies is when we're looking at people who have a certain disease. So if we look at a certain disease and we look at the backgrounds of those people who have that disease, we might be able to determine that, say, people who play a lot of video games are going to end up with, obesity or whatever. Again, we can't say that one causes the other, but we can start to see some patterns in the data using that retrospective study. A prospective study is different because we decide ahead of time we're going to look at these specific people and we're going to follow them as they go through this process. Now keep in mind, this is not an experiment. We're not changing, we're not saying this group is doing this and this group is doing this. We're just going to study what happens. So it's generally a better approach because we can record our data as we go, but quite often it's difficult. For instance, if we wanted to follow students from birth to age 18 and look at a specific variable, that would be pretty difficult because we know that it would take us 18 years to record that data. So for instance, bottle-fed versus breastfed babies, if we're looking at lifespan, well, gosh, that's a lot more than 18 years. That's a whole lifetime. So doing a prospective study with something like that would be difficult to do.